In this video we will explore an interesting technique for creating damage for furniture, using a sofa as an example. I'll also try my hand at creating graffiti and show you another method for creating concrete slabs for your diorama. So get ready for a long video. This time we are starting with the base for our diorama. The first step is creating a large elevation, as the main element of the diorama will be a stage in an abandoned pioneer camp. This element was part of an old computer game I was developing many years ago. The project reached the prototype stage, where you could walk around, collect items, open the map and even watch a small cutscene with the main character riding on a train. However, this project will never complete it. But I wanted to preserve the memory of the object I liked the most, the stage in the pioneer camp, so I decided to start this diorama with it. To glue the foam parts together, I am using double-sided tape, and I trim the excess material with a hobby knife. Next, I add another elevation, because the stage will be quite tall. For this I am using double-sided tape again, which in my opinion is a universal tool. After careful work with the foam and tape, our stage starts to take shape, although it still needs further refinement. The next step is to cut out the stage itself from the foam. It will be a triangular build with a wooden frame covered with a waterproof material. But before adding all these elements, I need to remove the excess foam. This process took me quite a bit of time. But in the end, I ended up with a pretty decent stage. Now it's time to start adding the wooden elements. The first wooden elements in my diorama were the panels I glued around the perimeter. I do this in every project, and many modelers also use this approach, because it gives the diorama a more professional, neat and presentable look. Right now, presentation is especially important to me, because I have a shelf where I display my works. It's not a museum, but a kind of showcase in my apartment. On one hand, it's pleasing to the eye. On the other, it required constant care, since I need to dust it regularly. But jokes aside, let's get back to the diorama. I glued balsa wood panels to the sides of the triangular building. They will serve as the base for the roof, and it's easier to attach other detail to them. Super glue reacts better with balsa than with foam, which it can melt. Once the roof was finished, I move on to filling the interior of the stage. For this I used balsa wood again to create a wooden frame that will hold the other elements. As you can see, there is nothing complicated about creating this wooden frame. You just need to carefully cut out a wooden box and install it inside the stage. For the assembly I use super glue, and it turned out like this. In addition to the box, I decided to add extra protection to other parts of the diorama, mainly for the foam. As I mentioned before, this is important to prevent the superglue from reaching with the foam and melting it. After some time, I had a completed wooden frame for the building. Now I need to attach another balsa wood panel to raise the stage, since it turned out to be too low. The result was satisfactory, and I could now proceed to attach the main elements: the boards and the cladding of the building. For the foam plank imitation, I'm using a thin wooden panel again, about 0.3–0.4 mm thick. As I'll mention many times before, this material is perfect for my purposes. This material does an excellent job of simulating wood. For a 1/72 scale diorama, you need to cut the material into thin strips that will mimic wooden planks. Then, using superglue, I started attaching these strips to the building frame, creating the cladding. The process is simple, you just apply superglue to the frame and attach the planks. For added strength, I apply superglue on the surface of the plank as well. This is especially important, since some planks may be too long and require trimming. During trimming, there is a risk of damaging or completely detaching a plank if it's not properly glued. To prevent this, I reinforced the adhesion with an additional layer of superglue. After trimming the excess protruding parts of the planks, the result looks quite good. Once the upper triangle of the cladding was fully covered with planks, I moved on to cladding the slanted sections. Each side required no more than 4 planks, and after attaching them on the both sides, I got a good result. However, when I tried to clad the triangles with a single panel by cutting it directly on the frame, the result wasn't as successful. The only saving grace was that the building was supposed to look abandoned and damaged, which fits the setting of my diorama. For the left triangle, I decided to use a different approach. I made it out of separate planks. This turned out to be much better and higher quality. With that, the exterior cladding of the building was finished. Now I could move on to the interior cladding. Unfortunately, the interior cladding of the building wasn't as simple. The easiest part of the interior cladding was attaching the planks to the stage. There was plenty of space to work with, and nothing got in the way. So I quickly and effortlessly glued the planks to the stage. After that, I refined the edges of the stage with long and short planks to give it a more natural look and achieve complete realism. I also took the time to conceal some details, and then moved on to creating the doorway. There will only be one doorway, unlike the original stage that was made in the game. This is because I couldn't accurately replicate the original stage's dimension in this diorama. As a result, adding a second doorway became impossible. Once the work on the stage and the doorway was completed, it was time for the most challenging parts of the building. First, the side panels. Gluing the planks onto the side panels was a bit tricky. The difficulty wasn't so much physical, as it was that I blocked the camera's view. It probably wouldn't have been more logical to build the structure separately first, so I could turn it and show it from different angles before attaching it to the diorama. But I chose a more complicated path, which made the process less convenient for you, the viewers. I'm sorry for that. So, to avoid tearing you out, let's skip straight to the result. Here is what I ended up with. I repeated the same process for the other part, and it's ready as well. Now I need to remove the excess details and start working on the most challenging part, the interior. Specifically, the rear interior panels. These panels turned out to be the hardest to make, so I decided to use the same method as I used when creating the doors and gate in the Witcher 3 tower diorama. I also applied this approach at the warehouse diorama. The method involves attaching several cross planks to a wooden panel. Once the glue dries, the planks are marked and cut with a hobby knife. Thanks to the cross planks, the structure doesn't fall apart, and the result is a sturdy shield made of planks. I added this shield to the diorama, and here is how it looks in place. Simply fantastic. Now I need to repeat the same process for the upper part of the interior frame, but before that I'll add a few cladding elements to cover up the areas that were left exposed. I glued some of the planks slightly askew to show that the building is old, and the planks have fallen off over time. I think it's +10 to the atmosphere. Otherwise, there were no issue. Attaching these elements was fairly simple. Unfortunately, there was a problem with the upper parts of the interior frame. The planks turned out a bit crooked, but this can be explained by the fact that the building likely shifted over time. It's wooden and has been standing for over 40 years. After attaching additional detail, I ended up with this interior frame. Of course, it's not perfect, but it's good enough for my diorama. Now I just need to finish the interior frame by covering all these elements with individual planks. The process is simple, but takes some time. For you it will pass in an instant, and here is the final result. The stage is almost ready. You may have noticed that some parts of the interior frame weren't covered with planks. I left them that way on purpose because they won't be visible on camera, and even if they do appear in the frame, they won't draw attention against the overall mass of planks. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we move on to the roof. This part is quite straightforward. My idea was that the roof hadn't yet been covered with shingles, but only with sheets of roofing felt, secured with planks. They probably planned to finish the work later, and this temporary cover was used to prevent the stage from rotting in the rain. Most likely, the trees growing around were supposed to protect the building, as the pioneer camp was located in a forest near Pripyat in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. However, back in 1985, people didn't think they would soon have to leave these places and abandoned everything they had built here. I think the bitumen roof adds drama to the theme. It shows that the building is unfinished. People wanted to return but couldn't. This place later became a shelter for stalkers who used it to spend the night, as it's one of the few places that can protect people from weather. I mean bad weather. Back to the roof itself, it turned out quite well. I'm pleased with the result, and in my opinion, it doesn't need any additional elements. It is a very simple roof made from wooden planks and masking tape. And if I had used shingles, the roof would have looked different, but it would have changed the atmosphere I wanted to convey. Yes, you may have noticed that I was playing around a bit with the mouse model. Initially, I thought about adding this animal to the theme to show that it's the only inhabitant of this area. However, later I abandoned the idea because the model turned out to be of poor quality. Because it's a children's toys, which I buy near my house. So, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the next stage, creating an imitation of concrete slabs on the foam base of the diorama. First, I use a ruler and pencil. I mark the slab's dimension. I choose square slabs. They are perfect for my diorama. It's worth noting that at this stage it's okay to make mistakes. As you can see, the slabs look uneven and you might say a bit ugly, but that doesn't bother me at all. We'll fix everything later. The next step is using a regular aluminum foil. We crumple it into a tight ball and use it to apply texture to the slabs by pressing into the foam. This gives the surface an interesting texture, making the foam look more like stone. And I decided to add an extra layer of damage to make the slabs look old and worn. Then I started creating the curbs, since on the one side there will be soil, and on the other an asphalt road. This is necessary to make the theme more diverse. You'll agree it's not very interesting when there is only soil or only slabs on the diorama. Height differences and landscape variety make a diorama lively and attractive. In my case, to create these height differences, I had to cut away the excess foam, which I did with a hobby knife. After that, I returned to working on the slabs. Now, using the same knife, I needed to carefully cut away the excess elements, especially the pencil marks. This is necessary so that later the cut areas can be filled with sand. Yeah, regular sand. Actually, you could use cat litter, but sand is still preferable. Why sand? It will become clear a bit later. So, let's keep removing the excess parts. On the left side of the diorama, there will be soil, and I plan to create a small slope covered with earth and grass. On the right side, there will be an asphalt road, and a small board for announcement and newspapers. Now let's talk about the sand. Why is it needed? Sand fills the gaps between the slabs on the diorama. Using a large brush, it's easy to spread it over the desired areas. Sand is perfect for simulating soil in any scale, whether it's 1/72, 1/35 or 1/48. It's a versatile material that creates a realistic effect. Now I applied the sand to the diorama, and look how nicely it settles between the slabs. Just mwah! The next step is to secure this material with a mixture of PVA glue and water, so that it holds in place. In addition, I decided to sprinkle some earth on top of the slabs to create the effect of a layer that has accumulated over time. If the slabs are left unturned for a long time, and people walk on them periodically, like the stalkers did, earth gradually builds up on them. I observed a similar effect near my house. A long time ago we laid several concrete slabs in front of the gate to make it easier to drive in bad weather. Before that, it was just a dirt area. After just 6 years, the slabs were almost completely buried under the earth, and we had to clean them. We lifted them, added more sand, and laid them down again. But over time, the slabs were once again overgrown with grass and covered with soil. This process is quite natural. After everything dried and I removed the excess, take a look at how the grass looks on the slabs. I can't hide my excitement. The result exceeded my expectation. The sand perfectly simulates soil on the slabs. Everything turned out even better than I had anticipated. Now we move on to the next task – creating furniture for the diorama. Unfortunately, I should warn you in advance that this furniture won't fit my diorama. I made the sofa too large. It's more suited to a 1/35 scale rather than 1/72, but that's okay. The important thing is that I can show you the technique I used. First, I made the frame of the sofa, including the side armrest and the main structure. All these elements were made from balsa wood. Now I am cutting the foam into the desired shape, splitting it in half, and these pieces will become the soft part of our sofa. To start, I shape it with my fingers. I make indentations and remove excess corners, so that the foam resembles a sofa more closely. Then I glued an additional strip of balsa wood to make it easier to attach the soft furniture elements. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a bit of magic. To make the soft part more realistic and to apply the promised damage, I simply use foil. Just simple aluminum foil. I cut this foil to the required shapes, smooth it out until I'm satisfied with the result. Then, tightly wrap the foam and glue the edges with superglue. This is the resulting piece. Yes, while the foam is wrapped in foil, it looks shiny and unnatural. But once we start painting, you'll change your mind immediately. I do the same with the back of the sofa, and then I glued this piece in place. It already looks decent, but it's time for the final touch. Using a modeling knife, I cut the foil and gently pull it aside, creating the effect of damage. As you can see, this gives the sofa the appearance of old leather or fabric furniture, with torn upholstery. Damage can be applied anywhere you like. I decided to stop here. By the way, I saw this method on Pinterest, where someone made a chair this way, and I thought not many people knew about this technique, but it's really great. It's just as cool as using leftover plastic parts to simulate locks. Okay, it's just joking. You could say that creating the sofa is now complete. This method can be used to make any soft furniture. Now, using small diameter plastic tubes, I'm making special stands, to which the boards will be attached to create benches. These benches will be located in front of the scene, where the audience once sat. But now this is an abandoned place, and S.T.A.L.K.E.R skillfully use the board from these benches to start a fire. I won't linger on this. I did a few tests and ultimately choose the perfect size for these elements. And here is what I ended up with. It may look unclear right now, but as soon as I glue the boards, the pieces will immediately take the desired shape. And in the snap of a finger, we'll get these excellent elements. I decided to make some benches intact, while others will be broken for various reasons. At first I wanted to add a few fallen trees. Therefore, I decided that the benches could have been broken either by mutants or vandals. Now let's take a few minutes to create a signboard where various flyers will be placed. I think the posters and newspaper put up by stalkers, and I want to make them look newer. It's kind of joke and at the same time a nostalgic note to the past. Perhaps one of the stalkers who posted this poster and newspaper here was once a child at this camp and wanted to liven up the place by adding a fresh newspaper or poster to the old iron advertising board. In general, the story of this signboard is simple, and there is not much to explain, so let's move on. Next, I decided to create some empty cans. Using a modeling knife, I squeezed this plastic tube to make them look broken and empty. Once the cans were ready, I glued them in place, spreading them throughout the diorama. There won't be many cans, 2 on the asphalt road, 1 on the stage, and a couple more on the tiles. Voila! Here is how it looks. I believe there is no need to add anything else. Now we can move on to the next detail. Honestly, at first I wanted to add small fir trees. They even look decent, but after painting they lost all their charm. The trees were made of translucent moss, but when painted this material loses its effect, and the trees start to look unfortunate. Therefore, I'm not satisfied with the result. I decided that adding them to the diorama isn't worth it. After all, I want to create quality trees, but that requires more experience and time. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving on to painting. First, we need to prime the model. This time I'm using paints from ICM. I started using them because they are cheaper than Vallejo paint, but I can assure you that they are just as good in quality. Look at the matte finish the diorama has after priming. Honestly, I haven't always achieved this level of matte with Vallejo paints. This doesn't mean that they are worse than ICM, of course not. And it's not an advertisement. ICM paints have proven to be very good, and I like them. Now the diorama needs to dry while I work on painting the sofa. The fabric part of the sofa was painted green, and you can already see how it looks during the painting process. Yes, of course in some places the foil could have been smoothed out better to avoid looking crumpled, but for abandoned furniture the result is excellent. Next, I apply several light spots to simulate wear on the sofa. Once they have dried, I move on to adding details with a brush. With it, I add scratches, scarves and other small effects. Of course, all this effect would look better on a leather sofa, such as one made of brown leather. These effects aren't as impressive on fabric, but they work well for an old abandoned furniture. To add extra detail, I decided to include a spring made from thin wire and glued it to the center of the sofa most damaged part. It might look a bit too thick, like a car spring, but for demonstration is quite suitable. Now let's move on to painting the inner upholstery. For this I use a color called Tan, with a small amount of yellow added. By mixing these colors and then darkening them with brown, I achieved a pretty good result. After painting, the sofa looks like this. The result is quite decent and doesn't require much effort, so anyone can create such an element for their diorama, provided they have an airbrush. Now that the sofa is done, we can move on to painting the theme. I start with the interior of the building, as the interior will influence the choice of color for the exterior paint. Using a wet palette to keep a paint in the right condition and the dry brush method, I began painting the boards inside the theme. I decided to make the interior less damaged. To achieve this, I combined the dry brush method with regular painting to get the desired result. This is more than enough to create a base for the graffiti that I plan to place inside the theme. I have seen many similar drawings on abandoned houses in the Chernobyl zone, so I wanted to reproduce that in my diorama. The exterior of the building is painted similarly, but using a different brush and a lighter paint to create the effect of a sun-bleached and damaged surface. Individual elements, such as door frame and extra board that support the scene, I painted in dark khaki. Khaki. I don't know. Okay. For the triangular and side part of the scene, I choose the color aquamarine. It creates the desired effect, and overall I like how the building looks. Now it's time to focus on the details. First, I repainted the building's cladding in dark khaki to divert the color palette. I had already painted it, but accidentally covered that with blue, so I had to repaint it again with green. Then, using the dry brush method and the color tan earth, I added wear to the board to create the effect of old peeling paint. I think it looks very realistic. What do you think? Leave your opinion in the comments. Now the work on the exterior cladding can be considered complete, and I move on to painting the floor of the scene. The main color for the floor is chocolate brown. I apply it using the dry brush method. And now the floor looks like old board covered with dirt. I also added some scuff, so we can consider the painting of this scene finished. Take a look at how it turned out. I'm sure this couldn't have been a better color combination with blue. Now comes one of the most challenging parts of the painting process – applying graffiti. First, I sketch the outline of the drawing with a simple pencil. My scene will feature a character from Soviet cartoons called Cheburashka, which plays the harmonica. First, I apply the background color using pure chocolate brown. Once the background is ready, I mix another paint and start adding additional elements. Details on the ears, paws and face of the character, using a darker shade. Then I outline the character. And here is what I got. The base coloring is complete. Off camera I painted the eye, as doing it on camera was too difficult due to the fine details. Now, using a light turquoise color, I add outlines to highlight the other elements. After that I move on to the finer details. I paint the harmonica gray, highlight Cheburashka's paws, draw the nose and pupils, and add a few details to the ears. The character is almost ready. I just need to add a few more details. Around Cheburashka I decided to draw simple white flowers with yellow center to fill the empty space. These details are simply but nicely complemented the composition. However, I need another drawing in the upper part of the inner board of the scene. I decided that the sun will be a great detail. It has always been a symbol of joy in Pioneer's camp, and it should appear here. Using the same method as for painting Cheburashka, I drew a small sun. The main color is yellow with light brownish tone to make it look old and faded. With that, the work on the drawing is complete. Now I add scuffs and damages to the graffiti, using the dry brush method. After such a long time, the drawing wouldn't be in perfect condition. A little wear only adds to their realism. And here is the result. Now we move on to painting the other elements, starting with the benches. I decided to paint the board a light blue color to match the scene. I used the same effect as before. First, a thick coat with the dry brush method, and then a lighter layer of a light paint to give the benches a worn look. This is important since the benches are outdoors and exposed to the bad weather. Next, using the dry brush method, I paint the advertising scene in a rust color. It's pretty straightforward, a scene with a rust effect, so I won't dwell on it. Now we switch on to painting the tiles. You might have noticed that I am painted everything somewhat haphazardly. For example, the metal parts of the bench shouldn't be painted until the wooden elements are finished. They also can't be painted before the ground and tiles are done, as I might accidentally touch the metal parts. These elements should be completely rusted, since they suffered significantly from exposure over 40 years. So let's get back to paint tiles. I paint the tiles with a simple grey paint, mixing black with the couple drops of Dectan. After using foil, the dry brush method proves ideal for painted tiles primed in black. It creates texture and the tiles look quite natural, even without a wash. Although a brown wash to simulate dirt wouldn't hurt. Here is how the tiles look after painted. The result is satisfactory. And now we can move on to painting the ground. I paint the areas of earth on the diorama using chocolate brown, again employing the dry brush method. This is one of the best tools, especially if your diorama is already primed. The sand I used for texture conveys the effect perfectly. Because of this I applied chocolate brown as a base, and then add flat earth and tan earth for additional detailing. Here is the wonderful result I achieved. The same action I perform throughout the diorama, paying special attention to spaces between the tiles. They need to be painted very carefully. At the same time, I applied patches of dust to the tiles. This is an important effect before applying the wash. The dry brush method allows me to easily achieve a realistic dust appearance, as dust can be everywhere in abandoned places. After that, I use the same color as for the tiles, but slightly lighter, to add highlights to the roofing felt on the roof, showing how this material has worn over time. Then I will treat it with a wash to imitate the mold and moss typical of humid forest areas. Now that the larger elements are painted, I move on to small rusty details. First, I paint the cans. For this, I use a dark rust as a base color, and then add lighter effect with medium rust and using the dry brush method. The result looks fantastic. The cans appear maximally rusty, creating the desired effect for the diorama. I use the same method for the metal parts of the benches. First, I coat them with dark rust and then add lighter effect with medium rust. The benches turn out very convincing. The result completely satisfies me. Now I can move on to applying wash. This is one of the final steps. I use wash from IKEA Interactive called Interior, which is an enamel wash. The result left me half satisfied. On one hand, the wash creates a wonderful effect, but on the other, it takes a long time to dry and has a not so pleasant smell. Nevertheless, the effect it creates is worth it. Now I just need to paint the board green, and the work of the diorama is nearly complete. I say nearly because we have two additional details left. The first detail is dry grass that I placed on the asphalt road. This effect looks not so good. I try to make it look better, but I can't. So I leave it as it is. And the second detail is clumps of grass that I prepared in advance. I already made a separate video about this and talked about it many times, but I also take your comments into account. In one of the previous videos, it was pointed out that the grass I use is too green. Therefore, to create a more abandoned and more autumn atmosphere, I use different color of grass. I think the combination turned out very well. And honestly, I don't see what else could be added to this diorama. Perhaps some trash could be scattered or crates placed around, but I don't find that necessary. The main focus here is on the theme. I wanted to capture this moment in memory. Yes, I probably will never finish the game or come back to it, but this episode will stay with me for a long time. My current hobby, as strange as it may sound, still carries the mark of my past passion. And now we come to demonstration of the final work. Yes, the video turned out long and a bit chaotic, but I hope I was able to show how to create and complete diorama from nothing. As you can see, all you need are few pieces of plastic, wood, foam, a bit of sand and a dash of creativity. It's all in your hand. Even the simplest material can be turned into something interesting. I think this diorama perfectly conveys the atmosphere of abandonment. So, if you enjoyed this video or find it useful, please be sure that you place thumb up and share your thoughts in the comments. And definitely share it with your friends. Let them see that there is nothing complicated about this hobby, and that even without expensive tools and models you can create dioramas. If you think, hey, Noquality, you still use airbrush, it's not cheap tool. My airbrush from China. It's very cheap. It costs less than $3. So again, I hope you learned something new from this video, beyond just a pleasant pastime. With that, I'll say goodbye. This was Vlad from the Noquality Dioramas channel. Goodbye guys, and until the next time.